Hi, this is my third video for today. I'm talking about to be a victim or not to be a victim. And I'm not teaching you how to not be a victim because I still don't know for sure if I know that. So what I'm doing is talking about myself and things I go through and why I feel the way I do about being a victim or not to be a victim. So, years ago, I have one daughter that went to therapy because her and I didn't get along, and we still don't. And I had that kind of a relationship with my mother. So I feel bad that it happened to me, and I feel bad it happened to my daughter. So, but in therapy, when a child goes to therapy and they blame their mother, this is so funny. This is funny because I'm talking about myself, really. I did blame my own mother for my whole lifetime, so it's okay. But because a young person, that's all they know. They know they're hurt, and they're hurt by not getting along with their mother, and they're hurt because their mother yelled at them, and they're hurt because they were rebellious and doing stupid things, so they got yelled at. And if you get yelled at and you go to therapy, you say it's your mother's fault. Okay. So then they get out of therapy, and they have a whole week in between sessions. And at this time, she was still talking to me. We were having some kind of conversations. And so this was years ago. And I didn't like it, the things she was saying to me, because they were like, it was kind of like sideways or a verbal cut or a verbal slash, like a verbal jab. Like, in other words, underneath it all, she was saying, well, I'm going to therapy, but I'm telling on you. I just have to crack up. It's so funny. It is funny now that, it's funny now that I'm older, but, so think about it like 20 years ago. So then she would say things like, I'm supposed to have boundaries. I said, okay. Or things like, I need my space. So that sentence was given out probably more than 20 years ago, but it flew out of somebody's mouth and then it went viral. So my children kept on saying to me, you're not giving me my space. So with one of my children, I said, I made your space. You know that, don't you? But on the other hand, I'm not a type of person that gives people space. I like to get real close up and say, hi, how are you today? And so they were told that they were allowed to have this space. And this space was to keep me at a distance as their parent so that they didn't get hurt. Now, a parent doesn't intend to hurt their children, but a parent is obligated to discipline their children. So there's all these levels going on. But the thing that I want to get to is she would say to me in a mean way, like her meanness was like filled with her whole lifetime of hatred against me. And she would say one sentence to me, and when I would say something back to her like, well, you did this thing, so I had to discipline you. Or, you're hurting me when you do this way, or whatever it was. So I was defending myself because she was hurting me, and she did hurt me. But I'm the parent, so I'm older, so it's my responsibility. I hurt her more than she hurt me. I know all that. So then she would say, you're not a victim. So this is the part that I want to talk about on this video. When someone says to you, you're not a victim, In other words, it's what's behind their words that are hurtful. Because you, as a person, know that you have hurt since the hurt part of you isn't healed yet. Anyhow, for me, myself, with one of my children, I feel like I have the right to say things as a parent. But somewhere along the line, I don't know when it was, oh my God, mutiny happened, where they all agreed together behind my back that I didn't have the right to say anything to them. So as a unit, four adult children decided that I'm not the parent anymore. And so I got exiled, and I got ostracized, and I got distance. Now, I don't want to talk about that whole thing because it is very hurtful to me. But when a parent has a child, you never get over the fact that you are the parent and they are the child, and you have a right to say things to them, no matter what. And even though you learn as they become adults, you learn to walk on eggshells, you learn not to say things, you learn that they can't take it. It's like zero ground. Zero ground. You are not allowed to say a word. And it even happened to me yesterday. But this thing where when somebody says to you, you're not a victim. This is an angry thing that is coming at you as an attack. And it's trying to make you not stand up for yourself. In a situation where you are going to be victimized again if you don't take charge of it. So it's a very twisted kind of thing. And for years, I really despised it when people would say, you're not a victim. But I am a victim. I was hurt. I was devastated in the travesties of the horrific things that happened all my life. I can't tell you one point in time when it wasn't happening. Oh, I remember. When I was smoking marijuana, it wasn't happening. In the 60s, in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And it was really the late 60s. I was a very innocent person of the drug world. But once I started innocently, once I got into it, there was times when things happened that were terrible. So I'm not condoning it, I'm just saying. What's the name of that? I don't know if it's TLC or that's, I think that means tender loving care. I don't know what it is, but the part that makes you giggle and laugh, that's what I like. And the rest of it, don't take it. Don't do it. Whatever it is. But I was a party person. I didn't wake up in the morning with an idea that I had to go get some. I'm not an addictive person. Although I drank alcohol for 2 years one time, morning till night. It was beer. And when I decided to stop, I just looked at my friend and I said, I'm done. And there's been things in my life that I've done. So I'm not innocent to that world. But I was saying, when did I think I was happy? So I was happy. The most happy years of my life was when I was an old hippie girl. And then I came right out of that and went into being a Jesus freak, because that's when I got saved in 1976, and there was a revival, and a Jesus revival. But I've always been me. When I was a little girl, I had a private world I lived in, my aloneness. And I carried that through all my life. When I was a hippie girl, if I was laughing and being silly, it was on the inside of me. It didn't matter who was sitting there and what they were doing. Groups don't matter to me. People don't matter to me. When I would attend different churches, the pastor doesn't matter. I don't listen to be told something that this man learned on his own through his lessons on the inside of him. No, I go home and I think about it. I talk to God. I have my own lessons on the inside of me. And if I learn lessons on the inside of me, that's how I get through life. I don't go to hear a man. Now, recently, I did find this one evangelist that I really liked. And I believed that he had a big part of it that I hadn't heard from other pastors. And it was kind of like the stuff that I learn when I'm alone. And I wanted to connect with his ministry. And I tried for, I guess it's been 4 years, or it was in the year before the COVID year, and then it went into the COVID year. I was trying to use my computer and my phone to connect with this thing about email. You got to do an email, and I never could get into the connecting with it. So I went to this weekend convention, and he was in convention center in Monroeville. I thought, oh good, I get to hear him in person. I get to see him in person. So it was great because of what I expected. That made it great. But he stood up there up front. I was about 15 rows back. I didn't get to say hello to him. There was never any contact. He had at least one that I saw, this man that looked like he was a bouncer in the mafia, standing off to the side. And the terrible thing is that these ministers that they want to do conferences to have face-to-face contact with people, but the agencies that work with them, and the more people they get to follow them, it becomes very dangerous for them. So they do have to have protection. But this causes this distance between a very sincere person and people that are going there to hear the message. So I was disheartened a little bit, but not totally. I thought, oh, this is good. I got to hear him in person. But I came home from that, and I began to challenge the things that he said. But I wasn't challenging them alone in my own time. I decided to use the email because I thought that I was able, I felt able finally to, I had the correct email, the correct letters, the correct name. So because he preached on things like he would help people fulfill their destiny, number one. He would help people publish a book or publish your stuff, because he had broken off from the other worldly publishing companies, and he had his own publishing company. That's what he said. So maybe I'll take this on myself. Maybe I am immature in thinking what I hear is really true. And also I'm kind of immature and childlike. I think things will happen quickly. And I feel really bad about this. Things don't happen quickly. And then the culmination of that is I am old now. So I can't wait for people anymore to do things for me. I can't look for a pastor to say it's okay. I can't ask permission to sing in the church anymore. I can't wait for someone to say it's okay to give your testimony. I went to a little church in Oakland a few months ago, and they did offer for me to bring my paintings. So I brought my paintings and I told the stories about each painting. And on that night, the pastor came over to me and said, "We would like you to come and do this for groups of people, victims of domestic violence people, women who would really relate to your stories." He offered that. I didn't ask it. I didn't even imagine to think of it or think of it to ask. Now he offered. I said, yes, I would love to do that. So then, a couple months went by. He never said anything else. So I decided to ask him if it was okay if he and I could talk about that. Well, I think I just had a brief conversation with him. It was like not even a minute. And he walked away saying like this, And then a couple more months went by and nothing happened. So I decided that I'm not an expert on anything. Even though I memorize scriptures, I'm not an expert. I don't always operate the way a good Christian does, and I don't always portray doing things the way Jesus would do it. That's the way it is. I'm a human being, and I really want to serve the Lord, and all I have is my testimony. And a testimony is when you get a victory from God that he rescued you, or he spared you a tragedy, or he saved you. So I know it says in Revelation chapter 12 that they overcame him by the word of their testimony. So I thought, okay, I'll back up totally. I won't say anything about my paintings. I'll just totally be on the fact that the scripture says they overcame by the word of their testimony. Now, when you overcome, that means you're not a victim anymore. So me doing these videos is me saying I'm not a victim anymore. But also, I really am a really realist, a real person in reality, that I do not want anything fake or pretend to come out on my videos. I used to pretend I was all right, and I still do that with my children. I have to. If I don't pretend I'm all right, they would just cave in right in front of me. So if I'm feeling sick, I dress up, put my makeup on, and I say to myself, I can do this for at least an hour or maybe 2, but then I'm done. I can go home and fall apart and be sick and have a headache and endure. But I never let on to them that I'm sick. I pretend. So they don't know that I really have different limitations and illnesses as I'm older. They don't get it. It's okay, because right now I'm not talking about that. That's for another video. So I want to say now, though, that I started this video by saying, when somebody says to you in a mean way, you're not a victim, and you do believe you have valid reasons, especially with that person, that they hurt you, then they're the one that's being very mean and awful, and they are hurting you again, and you're a victim. So I don't know how to change it, actually, except that somehow you suck it up. And you just look at them. And maybe if I could ever muster this out of me right at that moment, I would love to just look and smile at them. But yesterday with my daughter, we got into it, and she was actually doing something nice for me. But in the middle of it, there was this screw up. And that's how it always happens. You don't purpose it. You don't mean to do it. She didn't mean to do it. But in families, I mean, seriously, that's everybody's family. But with this one daughter, I always freeze. I can't argue back, because she totally, I don't know what she does. I don't know how she does it, but I have to freeze and not say another word. There's a thing she does, and I know she's had a lot of practice, because her and her husband are like at each other's neck, tooth and nail, and she's had a lot of training and practice in that area. And it comes out with me and her. So I never win. And I don't want to actually win. I just don't want to be victimized. So there's just all this thing, And my mother used to say, why do you have a tooth on me? Or my mother would say, why do you take umbrage with me? So here's what the expression, why do you have a tooth on me? Well, it's because what it means is, back in the olden days, my mother was a product of, she was born in excuse me, I'm burping again. She was born in 1914. And so she went through the Great Depression, and my mother had her own issues of pretend, and yell and scream. Anyhow, she told me that the expression means when a dog comes over to you and bites you on purpose, part of the dog's tooth is still hanging on. So it's like whatever my mother did to me when I was 3 or 4, that's the first tooth. And then as I got older, that tooth is still hanging there. And as I got older, that tooth is still hanging there. And as I get older, that tooth is still hanging there. And she said to me, "Why do you have a tooth on me?" Because she hurt me. Because I was a victim. Her victim. She hurt me. So I guess a victim person who was victimized when they were little, they always say, "I got hurt. That person hurt me." Well, some people get into this thing of self-pity. So what I know about that is about my mother. She had a way about her. She would never tell you what you did wrong or what anybody else ever did to her. But she would start this thing, and we knew that it was self-pity. She really wasn't crying outwardly. She didn't drop a lot of tears. And it also had to do with manipulation. So, I mean, we got used to this. We lived with her, and there was this thing that she did. It was weird. So we would call her poor, pitiful Pearl, that she was having her self-pity. And then we would say no to her. No. She would say, "Do this for me because I'm your mother." And we would say no. No, you don't need that right now. The battleground was there. The lines were drawn years ago. The boundaries were set. The war was going on, and it never stopped. And I'm sorry to say it never stopped. I did some things on my own behalf. When I was in high school, I sat in front of her in the living room and I said, "I know you think I'm an irresponsible person." And I said to her, I am so sorry for my irresponsibilities that affected you. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry that these things that I've done affect you. Please forgive me." And she sat there like this. And she didn't say, "Okay." And she didn't nod her head, "Yes." And she didn't look at me with a sincere heart like, "Oh, here's my daughter. She's giving up. She's apologizing." No, she didn't do that. She was like, I call it the pursing of the lips. I call it like that. So then time passed, and I took up I took down my white flag and put the other flag up. I went into the warfare again with her. But there were other things that happened. Like she had a heart attack, so nobody else could go take care of her. I dropped everything. I took my kids out of school, drove, 2 hours from the distance I was, and stayed with her to cook for her and take care of her. And that didn't matter. I was the only one that was there in the hospital with her that weekend when she had her massive heart attack. I was the only sibling there. But that didn't matter. I was already tagged as the black sheep of the family, that I didn't do things right and that I didn't do things for my mother. So these things are recorded in heaven, the what I did do. But anyhow, then it went on till years later, and I married a man that was a dry alcoholic. So he started going to AA a little bit, but I don't think he ever really continued. But I found Al-Anon. Al-Anon is the other group where you go to because you're a person that lives with the alcoholic. And you get just as sick as they are because you're back and forth with each other in conversations and behavior and everyday stuff, everyday daily activities in life. And there's reasons you get angry at the person that's an alcoholic. And then when they stop being an alcoholic, they still have the same behaviors. So then you're still angry. So the person who is not the alcoholic could become even more angry because the person who drank, they drank alcohol so they didn't feel angry. And they got happy from drinking alcohol. But the person who's not drinking doesn't have anything to anesthetize their feelings, and then all this bad behavior is coming towards you, and you're reacting to the bad behavior, and you are a victim. You are a victim. You are a victim. And you were a victim for that area of your life. And I was a victim. And then if you have an outburst, you're told that you are the abuser. And it gets very bad. It gets very bad. I'm still very upset about that. When you stand up for yourself to the abusive behavior, then you're told that you are the abuser. I'm very hurt about that. Very hurt. Because my husband beat me up, so I took my kids to women's shelters to protect them and to protect myself. As they grew older, they formed this idea that I was the abuser and that he never did anything. Because I protected them, they didn't feel the burden of what he was doing, his violence. But in protecting them, I took them away from the violence, so they didn't feel the abuse. So he became the sweet daddy that made the spaghetti sauce on the stove at his residence, and a big pot of pasta fazool. And as they grew up and got older, they drove to his residence, which was 300 miles away, and they would visit with him for a day and sit around the table and laugh and giggle and smoke marijuana joints and drink beer. They were a little bit underage, but so what? He's the candy man. He didn't raise them, I did. But when you raise people to become adults, you have to sacrifice yourself to be there for them and to discipline them. And so there's a story going around that I was the abuser. There's another story that is a lie going around my children, that I was taking them to women's shelters because of my past traumas of fear that came into me when I was mugged and raped innocently. So I was a victim for those things. I was also a victim of the domestic violence, but I carried all this load of burden and guilt. It wasn't my guilt, it was his guilt. And I guess making this video was very important for me, because now I understand what some of the pain is that's left over in there. So if you have leftover pain, you are still a victim. And I don't know how to get rid of it. I've done everything in the world to get rid of it, so I'm stopping, trying. I'm going to stop. So all I know is to hold on to the scriptures The one that says, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper. And any tongue that condemns me, I shall condemn. For this is the heritage of the saints." So I'm going to read that again, and then I'm going to end this video. No weapon that is formed against me shall prosper. Every tongue that condemns me and rises up in judgment against me, I shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. It's a puzzle and a mystery, and I'm fortunate to be able to speak on YouTube videos. And I'm not an expert. I'm just a person. And I hope somebody out there gets something out of this. Thank you.